Hey guys, Pat Ryarky here, also known as the Patriarchy, kicking social justice ass and all kinds of ass well into 2017 and the beyond. Marvel cancels uh, Ta-Nehisi Coates. I think it's Ta-Nehisi. Guy's a very weird name. Yeah, Ta-Nehisi Coates. They canceled Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Lives Matter comic due to poor sales. If you don't know who Ta-Nehisi Coates is, I've been following this guy for a few years. Even though I didn't say his name right off the top of my head, but I always had a hard time. I have a hard time with names. But basically, this guy's a writer, and he's a journalist. He worked at The Atlantic, The Village Voice, Washington City Paper, Time, New York Times Magazine, Washington Post. Basically, a bunch of places I get articles from to make fun of. He got a lot of traction a few years ago. He was on Stephen Colbert's show, and Jon Stewart back when he was on The Daily Show still. He was on there about a book he wrote about being black in America and stuff, and he actually argues for reparations, that we should give reparations for slavery. And he talks about white privilege and all that stuff. I'm not going to go out on a limb and call this guy a crazy SJW because I did actually go watch those interviews with him today, and he actually seemed like a pretty nice, reasonable guy in the way he talked and acted. I don't agree with anything he said at all in any of the things I saw. I haven't read his book. I've heard things. I looked at some of his articles. I wasn't really won over by the reparation article. The odd thing about the reparations thing, and we'll get back there later, is that Christopher Hitchens actually kind of argued for this once. And it's the one time I really, really disagree with Christopher Hitchens profoundly. And one of his points is how we don't have a modern Tower of Babylon, and we shouldn't give the money to the government at Babel. We should give the money to we should give the money to the people, give the reparation money to the blacks. And he makes a good point that you shouldn't feel like it's owed. He doesn't want the young people, the young black community, to feel entitled and owed by that. But he says, and this is the same argument that Ta-Nehisi Coates makes, and Hitchens makes this point in this video, and I'll probably link it in the description if you want to watch it. But the point basically is that white America needs to be put in an uncomfortable position to deal with the fact that this country was built off slave labor, and in his mind there's an institution still that's being played out to this day where white people benefit from that labor. And white people need to be aware that this is country. My issue with that argument from Hitchens and Ta-Nehisi Coates and this argument in general is that slavery was been around throughout history, and if we set this precedent of reparations for everybody who's ever been a slave, then where does it end? Also, I don't think the black community will be helped one iota if you give them that money at all. It wouldn't help at all. And Hitchens think the government's just going to give this money because he says this money is like in, I think he said it was in the Federal Reserve or something. We would pay this through the taxpayer money, and Hitchens to think there would be anything else is ridiculous. The taxpayers would pay for this. But basically my issue with it is that it'd be like people who win the lottery when they get money most of the time, they don't have it. They go broke after a short period of time. We have affirmative action, we have welfare, we have things to help the black community. They still have high crime rates. They still commit a disproportionate amount of violent crime, rapes, and murders for 13% of the population. Yet they talk about the inequalities, yet we still see that for 13% of the population, they're overrepresented in basketball, football, film, and television. You actually look statistically, they're overrepresented in all of those music. Way overrepresented in music. They dominate the hip-hop genre, which I don't care. I don't give a fuck. But the whole thing throughout history is it's funny that we get always the guilt of slavery and we have to pay reparations, even though it was a slave trade. The whole world had slaves for the most part, and we're supposed to be the guilty ones. And I don't really agree with this idea that black people are suffering because of this still, and white people benefit from it. Because my issue with that is the proof's in the pudding. The more you give people, it just doesn't work. If you just give the black community all this extra money, they're just going to blow it. Even Chappelle's show, he had that great sketch that one time where they gave the black community all this money for reparations, and they just had lines around the liquor store, and KFC became the biggest company in the world. That was brilliant satire back in the day. I miss Dave Chappelle, but the point was, it's like just giving money out ain't going to fix anything. It's not just giving them money like, here, this will make it all go away. Everything will be exactly the same. Crime wouldn't go down, poverty wouldn't go. It would all be, none of the problems would go away. But black fathers wouldn't stay with the wives and the kids more just because you gave them reparation money. And my argument, and I think it's something I've said many times, and it's a harsh point to make, and I know this is going on a tangent away from the original article, but it's always that the black community failed themselves. And until they address that within themselves and say, hey, we're going to fix ourselves from within and have some self-reflection, you're never going to make any progress. Because if it's always this white guy is the reason that violent crimes are unproportionate, or that there's so many broken families, or the fact that you think you can't make progress in this country. It's always a white person's fault. It's a narrative that a lot of black youth are told their whole life that they have to live by, and they're told they're not individuals. As a libertarian myself, I think individually. So I think that you have as much opportunity and chance to make it here as anyone else. But when you're told that you're being held back from birth because you're black and because of the past, and also, I mean, just to get in a few things, most people today, white Americans, they didn't own slaves in their ancestry. It was actually a very small population of Americans back then who owned slaves, and a lot of our ancestors fought in the Civil War to free slaves. Now, I'm not saying that makes slavery right or justifying it, but I don't believe in this reparations thing. It's not going to fix anything. Now, if you wanna work on the black community and in the schooling and crime and the broken families, I'm totally up for helping them with all those things. I think we should have programs for that, and I think we should have support for that. Totally agree. I'm just not paying money to give people that weren't slaves money that they feel that they're owed. And even though Hitchens, who's one of the most brilliant minds, has argued for this, I don't think he makes a solid point at all, because he makes a moral argument for it. I don't like those moral arguments. Hitchens makes kind of almost a religious-esque argument here, because it's holding the sin on you, the guilt of sin that you have to pay for in that Christianity way. And I feel it kind of goes against Hitchens' message, but maybe I misinterpreted it. Anyway, let's get back to the main story. Ta-Nehisi Coates is writing Black Panther. I've only read the first couple issues of his Black Panther run. I wasn't a huge fan. I thought it was okay. I kind of liked the first issue, really didn't get into it. I didn't even read this book, Black Panther and the Crew. I've read this book before in the past, I think. I did a video way back. It did really well about Marvel's declining sales, and they were saying it was because of diversity. But it was really because these books are poorly written and not handled well. And them hiring a guy like Ta-Nehisi Coates, who, for me, is kind of, if not a radical leftist or regressive or social justice warrior, he definitely believes in the ideology in a lot of ways. I mean, he's on there with Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert talking about white privilege. He's talking about how white people need to be aware of this. And it's all about all that crap empathy, and you have to feel this. It's like, quit putting your moral grandizing thing on to make me feel white guilt. I know Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert love that shit. It's so weird even going back and watching an old Daily Show. It's like, God, this is kind of overhyped, because this is still a lot of that same bullshit Trevor Noah does. No one is buying Marvel's lineup of social justice-themed comics. It's no surprise given that few readers want politics to be forced down their throats. Thus, liberal darling Ta-Nehisi Coates and Yona Harvey's Black Panther and the Crew is getting the axe after poor sales just two issues after its launch. Its cancellation comes weeks after Marvel VP revealed that comics with forced messages of diversity were responsible for the publisher's sales slump. And the thing is, like I said before, Marvel was always about diversity with X-Men and Spider-Man and the Hulk, and it was always about people that had problems and they couldn't relate to everyone, and they were bullied and outcasts. And they were relatable and human. Marvel always had that, and comic readers and Marvel fans always loved diversity in messages, but they liked good storytelling. The X-Men were great characters with good writing. A lot of the stuff, the feminist messages, the pushing of political crap, I mean, they pretty much comment on Trump without any subtext. They comment on illegal immigration. Once again, watch Captain Cummings' channel. I recommend his channel. He reviews a lot of comics with the social justice stuff. Marvel's been doing this stuff like crazy. DC does it too occasionally, but I still think DC's kept their characters right. I still think a lot of the stuff they're doing in Rebirth, I still think there's great Batman and Superman books. The problem with a lot of the Marvel books is, beside a lot of mediocrity, which is weird because Marvel was killing in sales a few years ago, they have these books where they're pushing political correctness, they're pushing social justice messages. Years after this stuff is not trendy and it's dying off, I don't know why Marvel thinks this would sell. They think that this is the audience. Like, who the hell buys comics is like, oh man, Ta-Nehisi Coates, the guy who talks about white privilege and reparations for slavery and wrote a book about being black in America, he's writing a comic book? Oh my god, I gotta go get that. It's like, no, it's not how... Joined by Luke Cage, Manifold, Misty Knight, and Storm, the titular superhero who entered the limelight with Captain America: Civil War gathers his all-black crew of superheroes to investigate the death of civil rights activists who died in police custody. It has echoes of Sandra Bland's death. Set in near-future Harlem turned police state patrolled by robotic police officers controlled by a private security contractor, The comic has every element you'd expect from a comic attempting to tell a story inspired by Black Lives Matter. The cops beat people up for no reason, too. The city put Harlem under curfew. The order was unconstitutional. Worse, it wasn't going to work. On top of all that, the mayor beefed up security. Yeah, it's font small. Beefed up security with a private contractor. AmeriCops, a mechanized private army deployed into the heart of Harlem. What could go wrong? God, that's pretty on the nose. This is like 60s, 70s comic shit. That's so on the nose. This feels crazy. This feels painfully outdated. And I didn't like his Black Panther. It seems like Ta-Nehisi just isn't a very good comic book writer. He seems to be a fan. But I don't know why he was necessarily picked to come in and handle these books. I think they could have... I kind of get it. I actually think his father was a Black Panther. So maybe they were going with that. But he does seem to just be kind of a poster child for the left in a lot of ways. You see him on those talk shows and stuff. And they act like he's so insightful. I mean, God, I watched a bunch of YouTube videos with him this morning. It was like, everyone needs to read this article in this man's work. Here's Ta-Nehisi Coates. And he says nothing. It's the same shit you see in an MTV News or a Lacey Green video about race or privilege. It's the same arguments. There's nothing more. He just articulates it a little bit better. And the best argument I could see with some of the stuff he was saying was from people like Hitchens, and even there, I think those are outdated. That's from 2001. I'm not sure if Hitchens would say this today with what's happened. But look at this shit. AmeriCops. Jesus Christ. What sucks is this could be a good comic. You could have a good comic about a black, superhero team, and I love Misty Knight and Storm and stuff, but, even the recent Luke Cage show had commentary about police shootings and stuff, and it was pretty in your face, and I still like that show because it was still well written for the first half and well acted, and had a lot of good scenes. And it made a good point about race. There's actually a great scene with Luke where he has a gun put to his head, and a guy calls him the N-word, a black guy, and he's like, don't call me that. And it's really powerful. But I've seen this guy, Ta-Nehisi Coates, talk about Eric Gardner and all that stuff. He's like, see how he was killed despite what he not doing anything? It's like, how many times do I got to bring up that guy was resisting arrest and did so for a long time and had a record and kept fucking with cops for years? I don't know why. There's always this time where a guy's resisting arrest, he gets taken down. I get it. He died. He had a heart attack. He was getting choked. That shouldn't happen. I don't disagree. But it's always this thing that they act like these white cops are just out there gunning down black people. And Ta-Nehisi Coates is explaining how he's talking to his son, and we try so hard. We have to try double or triple as hard than white people, and we still get punished for being black. And I'm like, not really, dude. You're a rich writer guy who's getting to work for Marvel. I don't think your life's that bad. I think the context is that middle class America in general, is suffering from poverty and crime right now in a lot of places, and we need to look at that. It's a money issue. It's how this country's. I think it's too much government oversight. Actually, I think it's the government having too much control in these people's lives, and they'd be better off with less government influence. I think giving people money and extra stuff is always a bad idea. Throwing money at something doesn't fix it. Naturally, the social justice superheroes take justice into their own hands and go to battle against the corrupt system while learning about the historical figures of the civil rights movement. Univision-owned entertainment vertical Gizmodo enthusiastically describes the crew as one of the tales a timely story about real-world issues like how police brutality devastates black communities. Coates explained to The Verge that Marvel decided to kill the publication due to poor sales, and there wouldn't be any continuation after the current story arc ends in its sixth and final issue. So it only had 6 issues, not a very long run. The market spoke, and Marvel listened. Christopher Priest's original run of the crew in 2003 performed similarly poorly and was canceled after just 7 issues. Like Coates' new effort, Priest's run was also made up of non-white superheroes who took on gentrification in New York City. Citizen, you are in violation of curfew. You will produce identification and submit yourself to arrest. Let's see about that. Here's my citizen, put down your weapon. Restraint protocols engaged. Or Misty, Citizen, stop resisting, stop resisting, stop resisting. The resistance, baby. Gizmodo writes Charles Pulliam Moore takes issue with Marvel's business decision to opine how the publisher was canceling the only mainstream comic featuring a majority black, a misnomer, yeah, who gives a fuck, cast of characters, describing it as a bad look for Marvel. Oh, God, Gizmodo. How's Gizmodo still around? It's like fucking Polygon or something. The writer says the publisher should have considered more thoughtful approaches instead of canceling the underperforming title. What do? You cancel it when it's not selling. If a book's not selling, you cancel it. Ironheart's not selling. Female Thor's not selling. These books aren't selling. They're poorly written. They're not well written. They're, like, nobody cares if you have progressive or messages or leftist messages if they're well written and incorporated in the story. I brought it up a few times. Saga. Saga's a book I read with Brian K. Vaughan. It's got trans stuff in it, gays, all kind. It's an anti-war book. It's basically Game of Thrones meets Star Wars, and it's got a lot of leftist messaging in it from Brian K. Vaughan. But there's good characters, there's good writing, there's good world building. You don't care. It's deep. It's smart. It's fascinating. So you don't give a fuck if his politics comes into it a little bit because he's a good writer. He doesn't force it down your throat. Um, it's who he is. I don't mind that from a writer. What I don't like is when your whole premise of your comic is built around that. And that seems to be the thing here. It's like, okay, man, like, you got to make the characters and the storylines interesting first. Just having that message of police brutality or cops killing blacks in Harlem is not enough. Like, Luke Cage had the police brutality angle, but Luke was a good enough character and it was well enough acted that that was enough to carry the show for him to go in the Defenders. You like the actor well enough. You don't like these characters in this book, I'm guessing. I didn't read it, to be fair, but I'm not liking the dialogue boxes I looked up. Pulliam Moore argues that comic book industry needs to change in order to sustain itself and cultivate new readers. Yeah, it needs to stop having social justice messages, and insists that stories like The Crew deserve to be told. Why? Why do they deserve to be told? Why does no comic book story deserves to be told? But offers no solution for culturally relevant comics that just don't sell. Given Marvel's failed forays into culturally relevant storytelling, it's clear that any attempts to cultivate a new audience shouldn't come at the cost of alienating existing readers. If there's any market at all for Black Panther and The Crew, it certainly wasn't with the social justice warriors who cry when their stories are canceled but refuse to spend any money on them. Yeah, it's the same way when I was bringing this up during the Olympics. There was all this controversy about that young black girl, not Gabby, but that other black girl, and Simone Rice, I think. And everyone was talking about her and how she didn't get the same praise as Michael Phelps because he was a white guy and she was a black female, and people don't appreciate female athletes. And I talked about it at the time, and I said, once these Olympics are over, no one's going to talk about this because all of these people do not watch sports. They just watch sports when the Olympics is on. They watch gymnastics. Then the rest of the year, between the 4 years between the Olympics, they're not going to talk about this. They're not going to watch any female-driven sports. They're not going to buy any merchandise. And then they're going to bitch about it again at the next Summer Olympics. And I was totally right. Here we are after that Olympics, and no one's talked about that stuff anymore. I made a video back then, the hypocrisy of it all, that if it was a black athlete and they would try to say everything was racism, or they didn't get enough music, they didn't get enough, the media's criticizing them too much. And then Michael Phelps, the biggest winner in history, ever, he's won the most gold medals ever, he's overpraised because he's a white guy. It's because he's a white guy. And then these social justice warriors in between that, they don't watch the WNBA. They don't buy merchandise. They don't watch gymnastics in between the Olympics. They don't support female swimmers. They don't support female sports. They don't help the ratings. They don't help the merchandise. They just like to talk shit and virtue signal. That's what this stuff always is. No one ever puts their money where their mouth is. You want to have reparations for slavery, the people out there? Put your money. You pay for it. That's fine with me. If you want to give your money, go ahead. You have every right to spend your money on. You want social justice books? You want progressive message comics? Write your own independent comic book. That's your right to do it. Maybe it'll sell, maybe it won't. See what you can do. It's not an obligation of Marvel to do it. And we got to keep going down the road with that. You can't just give people things because they want it in the moment, because there's no conviction to it. Because the problem with social justice is it doesn't have a long-form commitment to anything. They only care in the moment, and then they don't follow through. And then they always backtrack when they happen. We'll see it with Dread Girl. She gets punched in the face, then she's the victim, even though she went there to scalp Nazis. This happens over and over and over again. It's just tiring. It's a waste of time to even put this stuff anywhere, because it's never good. Now Dear White People's on Netflix. Bill Nye Saves the World. 13 Reasons Why. All full with these terrible progressive politics shoved down them, instead of just being enjoyable shows like they could be, because they have good ideas and pieces, but goddamn. And the media and talk shows, Stephen Colbert, fucking James Corden, Seth Meyers. I mean, every night's Trump. The other day I watched Saturday Night Live, and every sketch was pretty much about Donald Trump. I mean, it was like 70% of the show. And then if you turn on TV at night, that's what they're talking about. It's like, God damn, it's only Donald Trump or Russia is all you hear about anymore. And it's such a burnout. And then they put the stuff in the comics like, man, people don't want to read about this shit right now. They want to read stories that take them somewhere else and make them feel good or evolve who they are or enhance the feeling they already have with this mythology with the characters. It's not good to just say, hey, you're white, feel like a piece of shit now. Read this book. No. And fuck Ta-Nehisi Coates getting all this praise from the left. Like, once again, no problem with the guy personally, but everything I've read from the guy, everything I've seen the guy, nothing insightful, nothing great, nothing. It seems like he just gets praised just because he's an articulate, educated young black guy, but he has said nothing of insight that I have found. He has said nothing I haven't seen before, and he has written nothing so far that I've read or seen as a comic book writer that makes him worth of note. He's going to work on some TV shows, though. I did see that. Where was he working on? He's working on a miniseries, and he's working on a show on HBO where Oprah Winfrey is producing. And he's working on a show with David Simon, which I don't know. It's about Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement. So the guy's all about civil rights and black stuff. So I'm assuming this is why they hired the guy, but that doesn't make it a good book. It seems like it's preaching like a lot of the other Marvel books, and the sales show that people don't like being preached to when they read. At least in the comic book industry, people don't mind buying preachy novels. And Marvel later released spin-offs called World of Wakanda and Black Panther and the Crew, with the latter being written by Coates and telling a story about a group of heroes, Black Panther, Storm, Misty Knight, Luke Cage, and Manifold, teaming up to figure out what happened to a man who mysteriously died in police custody. It was pretty timely stuff, but unfortunately Black Panther and Crew didn't manage to connect with readers like Coates' solo Black Panther book did. Or I guess Black Panther's an established character and that movie came out, so he got popular into the mainstream in a way he wasn't. Let's see if that book continues selling years down the road. Now The Verge is reporting that Marvel has canceled Black Panther and the Crew due to poor sales. Only 2 issues of the Crew have been released so far, but Coates says Marvel will still publish 4 more before officially dropping it. Coates also says the book's central mystery will be solved by the end. Of course, they need 6 issues. Huh. Well, I guess, I don't know. Tim Allen's show gets canceled, and I guess the payback, in a sense, is Ta-Nehisi Coates gets his book canceled, Black Panther and the Crew. But what do you guys think? Did you read this book? Did you like it? Did you read these 2 issues? Or did it just not ring for you? I think it was just poorly marketed and handled from the beginning. I don't even think it's a good premise for a book. Robot cops hunting down black people in Harlem. That's a pretty bad idea, in my opinion, for a story. The artwork's kind of cool, if that's the artwork. It's very stylized. A little too stylized, maybe, but this is the Patriarchy. Like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you feel. How do you feel about Marvel? What's your favorite book currently? Are you sick of the social justice shit, not stick, infesting your films, your television, your media? Aren't you ready to just have good stories again, and comedy, and humanity, and pathos, without feeling like it's some anti-Trump, anti-alt-right message or something all the goddamn time? It's getting annoying. It's getting boring, and I don't know. I know this video was about a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, this book and the context around it's about a lot of different things. So I try to give as much insight as possible. I wish I had actually read the book to give you guys a bit better insight into it and a bit better review, but what can I do? Black Panther. Love that costume. Anyway, till next time, go fuck yourselves.